I see the similar thing where companies they get a machine built that can execute a tactic. And so that's, somewhat their engine of growth. There's something that kind of works, but there are elements that, are bottlenecks, and there's a one level above where there's kind of no one there. There's no one looking at it, and they kind of stall out like that. Whatever machine they've built has reached a sort of steady state, and there's nobody there to help build the next machine or identify. So it's interesting to me to hear that you see the same kind of similar issues in companies. So there's two elements that you mentioned there. One is just people leaving the workforce, and the need is still there. So we need to have these executives there and leaders in those roles at companies. And this way of being able to bring someone in remote, typically for a lower cost, has kind of fueled this fractional kind of boom that we're seeing right now. Lewis, welcome to the Growth Stories podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the show. So you're the partner and chief growth officer at TechCXO, and I'd love to hear, well, before we get into the details of TechCXO, why is fractional leadership growing right now? Like, why is it important right now for companies to find fractional leaders?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on, Jean-Michel, and I'm excited to speak with you today. I'm actually part of the revenue growth practice.
Mm-hmm.
I am the chief revenue officer.
Yep.
The partners within my group support companies to help accelerate revenue growth, either through marketing or through sales or through both. So I'm a partner in that practice, just to clarify. But in answer to your question, why there's been a growth in fractional executives and a growth in demand for fractional leadership, I think it really goes back to the pandemic. We've seen a lot of explosion in our business, meaning TechCXO, which is where I'm a partner, over the last 5 years. And a big part of it is the pandemic had a few implications in terms of business and management and the workforce. The first is a lot of older people, experienced people, left the workforce because of they didn't want to go back to work, go back into an office, or there were issues with remote working, et cetera. So I think that was a factor in terms of taking a lot of experienced executives sort of out of the market for a period of time, realized either for economic reasons or for intellectual or personal satisfaction reasons that they wanted to go back in. So I think that created a supply. I think on the demand side, what happened was companies realized that they could get stuff done without somebody physically being next to them. That was true across functional areas. So where I used to, and now I really need my, head of marketing, or I really need my head of sales to be right here so I can, talk to him or her every day. There was a realization that—
So we can talk quotas.
Exactly. So we could talk quotas. So I think what they realized is that was not the case. That the fact is that people could work very effectively remotely, especially senior people, because nurturing.
Does that mean part of the fractional growth is just also that it's remote? It tends to be remote, these fractional roles, and that you're saying that's part of it from the pandemic. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So my company's been in business for 20 years, and I joined in May of 2020. So I literally joined right during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. My partners have told me that prior to the pandemic, 60 to 80% of their engagements were physical engagements where they were going into the office. As a result, we were very geographic focused. Mm-hmm. So our largest presence is in Atlanta. That's where the company was founded. So they were looking for Atlanta clients. If there was a client in Texas or in California, in many cases, they couldn't handle that client because they couldn't physically go there every day or week, right?
So prior to that, you were in the Atlanta tech scene.
Yes,
and now you're expanding. Yeah,
exactly. Now, for my practice, since I've joined, I have not physically gone into any of my clients' based offices on any kind of a regular basis in 5+ years. Now, I will go and I'll meet with my clients quarterly or semi-annually. We'll get together. I'll go to their offices then, sometimes just annually. But I would say 95% of my work is done kind of right here at home and through, various interactions, Slack. And the other thing is there's just been a great growth in tools that enable you to communicate with people in real time. Slack's been a great and new platform.
Yeah. So part of it, so there's two elements that you mentioned there. One is just people leaving the workforce, and the need is still there. So we need to have these executives there and leaders in those roles at companies. And this way of being able to bring someone in remote, typically for a lower cost, has kind of fueled this fractional kind of boom that we're seeing right now.
Yeah. And those are actually two other factors that you touched on that go just a little bit more detail on. The first is lower cost. So to hire somebody with my level of experience full time would probably be 3 to 4 times what you can get before on a fractional basis. I
Yeah.
can probably accomplish 70 or 80% of what I could accomplish in a full time role in a fractional on a fractional basis because I just know how to make certain shortcuts and things like that from my experience that can help me sort of get things done quicker. The second thing is a lot of companies, again, during the pandemic, lost senior leadership for the same reason. People were exiting, and there's been a bit of a gap. And so I think they sort of said, okay, we don't need, a CFO or a CTO or whatever the case may be. I can get by with young developers. I can get by with, people of a
Hmm.
certain level. What they're finding is that it can only take you so far. And so what
Yeah.
my practice does and what my partners do is help companies really figure out how to accelerate growth, how to position themselves for a transaction, how to do a business pivot, things that, our partners have had a lot of experience with over time, and we can leverage that experience with clients.
And what for TechCXO, what are the most typical roles that you're filling?
So internally for TechCXO, we're always looking for new partners.
Oh,
We
I
have
meant the other way around.
okay.
You're like for your clients or for the
Oh,
clients you
okay.
serve, like who are they looking for? What kind of help are they looking for now?
Great question. It varies depending on the client's needs. So I'll give you, a couple of quick examples. Let's
Mhm.
take finance, right? A lot of clients might be companies that have gotten to a certain level of revenue, especially family-owned businesses. And they've sort of, they've had an accountant to prepare their books each year, but they haven't really put together a financial plan. They haven't put together any kind of a business model or, a revenue model. And so they will hire a fractional CFO to come in there and sort of create structure, create process for financial accounting, which is important because as they grow, A, they're going to need to keep track of, are they selling things at a profit? And then B, if they get to a point where they want to either do an acquisition or be acquired, they're going to need gap accounting and other types of, infrastructure to be able to
Mhm.
show exactly how much the business makes. Another example would be in the area that I work in, which is marketing. In many cases, companies will have a good, team of people or a couple of individuals who will focus on transaction marketing, let's say, lead generation or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
But don't have anybody kind of take a step back and say, okay, big picture, what's the go-to-market plan? What
Yes.
distribution partnership should we make to be able to grow the business? Okay, our business is currently at a $10 million ARR. How are we going to get to $100 million in ARR? And that type of thinking is something that a lot of times a fractional CMOs have 30 plus years of experience, like I have, can come and bring that perspective, leveraging both their knowledge from other businesses as well as kind of what they know is going on and be able.
Yeah. And just to riff on this, because I'm also a fractional CMO, I see the very similar, I just smiling because I see the similar thing where companies sort of they get a machine built that can execute a tactic. And so that's, somewhat their engine of growth. There's something that kind of works, but there are elements that, are bottlenecks and there's a one level above where there's kind of no one there. There's no one looking at it and they kind of stall out like that whatever machine they've built has reached a sort of steady state and there's nobody there to help build the next machine or identify. So it's interesting to me to hear that you see the same kind of similar issues in companies.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me because it's, you don't know what you don't know, right? And there are a lot of entrepreneurs and business leaders who have grown business and get it to a certain size, but they usually come from some functional perspective. A lot of times it's technology, other times sales, sometimes it's finance. And I'm deliberately picking those because if they're coming from marketing, then they probably are further along and don't need necessarily somebody like me or you. And then they hit a wall. And exactly as you're saying, all of a sudden their growth seems to be capped because they've been able to tap into the easy business, right?
Hmm.
Leverage networks. Maybe they have some relationships from previous jobs, with companies. Maybe they get lucky and or a investor makes a connection for them, that pays off. But then all of a sudden they sort of stall, and that's where they need somebody to kind of take a more strategic perspective and say, okay, how are we going to take this business to the next level? How do we diversify our product mix, our distribution scheme, our marketing mix, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I love it. Well, one question I'd like to ask you, kind of a selfish question that I'm always trying to deal with is how do you counter short term thinking in marketing? There's a fun saying I like that, all marketing works. If you show somebody a message, they respond. All marketing works somehow. People are responding to messages you put out there. And I find that, especially on earlier stage companies, there's a belief that you have to have there's specifically some tactic out there that the problem is the tactic and not the consistency or execution. And that usually requires, just a longer time horizon to understand what's going on and to, stay with the problem to solve it. What do you do? Do you ever face this problem where the companies you're working with are sort of short-term minded, or they're more tactically minded and are not able to see how it connects to execution, for example?
Yeah, and that's a great question, a great point. And I've worked with many clients who have done sort of exactly that. And what I like to do is two things. One is, a boss of mine once said, it's okay to knock off some gas stations on the way to robbing the bank. So the idea is, are there some quick wins that could say, okay, within a quarter or 2 quarters, you're going to see some results from this, but it's not going to get us to where we need to be. Because then I pair that with the second thing that I'll discuss with them, which is, you've been trying to kind of look at what you can do to drive revenue this quarter now for the last X number of quarters or X number of years. It has only taken your business so far. For you to get the valuation that you want, for you to get the growth that you want, for you to make this, this mission-driven business as big as you want it to be, you have to start thinking a little bit differently. And I'll lay out the logic behind it and where the opportunity is. A big part of what I do is helping them to understand what the TAM and SAM is, the total addressable market and the total addressable market, and how their product fits in with that. So understanding those things, is critically important. I mean, there's a client that I've worked with for now several years, and we're trying to build a brand new market for their data that hasn't really been done before by a company outside the industry. And it is a slog. It is challenging to do, but CEO gets it and understands it and is willing to be patient. And so, even though he's impatient in many ways, he understands that this is something where, okay, down the line, this is going to be, something that's going to significantly drive our ARR and take us to the next level.
I love that. I love the point you made about it takes different thinking, that quarterly thinking, or even worse, weekly thinking, is only going to go so far. And there's something missing in this kind of weekly data. There's longer term information that you can't you can't see if you're just looking at by month. Or so I love that. Well, right now there's so much going on in marketing. I feel like like this year has been the weirdest year. It's accelerating, especially with AI. And at the same time, like, the fundamentals are all exactly the same. What's your take on AI's impact to marketing?
It's a great question, and one that we have a lot of discussions about. We have a whole Slack channel focused on everything AI. We've had it for a year and a half. We have partners who have written extensively on AI. I think where AI has impacted marketing and business has been in a few sort of distinctive areas. The first is content creation. Okay. AI makes content creation, whether that be advertising messages, whether that be decks, whether that be content, whatever the case may be, a lot easier than it used to be. And as a result, you can get much more velocity in terms of creating things than you could, necessarily in the past. And it's actually kind of interesting because dynamically created ads was something that Google and Meta have been doing for 15 years. So essentially all we're doing is now AI is taking that to the next level and actually creating, in some cases, original content. Whereas before, Meta and Google would just sort of mix and match headlines, body copy, links, et cetera, to create ads. So I think that's been a sort of a key area. The other is in process improvement. And so trying to figure out how to optimize processes, whether it be in technology, in finance, whatever the case may be. Again, AI, I think, has enabled people to put the jigsaw puzzle together in a way that was either too time consuming or too complex to do kind of on your own. And then, a third area, that I see is that AI is, I don't think AI without a human in the loop is nearly as effective as with a human in the loop. So I think what it's done is really enhance productivity. So as a result, where it's impacted hiring, and I think, the Amazon announcement obviously is a great illustration, right? How many of those 14,000 jobs were due to an AI, AI putting somebody out of a job? The fact is, if I could be twice as productive using AI, then you don't need two of me, right? Now, I'm sort of at a different level. I'm at a more senior level where I'm focused on kind of the overall picture and also execution, which I think is a little for AI to sort of address. But if I'm a more junior person, I don't need somebody to be doing, Google AdWords, Meta, as well as, lead generation through, other pay per lead sources. I might be able to just have one person do that, leveraging AI to do the optimization.
Yes. Yeah, I have had a similar experience where, I mean, I feel the same about having someone in the loop. There's so many cases of, especially in marketing, it's okay if things go wrong, but you never want to, damage the brand. And there's so many risks around, automated content creation where it might say something untrue or hallucinate something. You need somebody, really thinking about it before at least you share something publicly. This reminds me of a funny mistake I saw. There was like a company selling pens, and they were using like AI to pull famous quotes and kind of show it handwritten with the pen. And unfortunately, it drew some like nasty political things from the past. No one noticed that it was terrible stuff that they had scrawled out and put on Instagram. So things like that can happen. And in any case, it's amazing the speed the volume you can do. It's still very hard to though communicate emotion and get high quality. That's what I've noticed. Like it seems to be very effective for extremely high ad spends, for example, to add some more volume. But when you're still trying to figure out what to say, it gives you more generic.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of garbage in, garbage out, and this is where the loop part matters. Just put in a prompt that says chat to ChatGPT, let's say, and hey, ChatGPT, create an ad campaign for pens. I'll use the example that you just did.
Yeah.
Leave it open ended like that. You're going to get back pretty generic
Yeah.
stuff, right? What I will do, and I will use it to help me with creative and with messaging, is I will put as much information as I can. And that information starts with my notes. On every meeting that I have, I take, notes on Word. And so I have these enormous documents. Sometimes they're, recapping what's happening in the meeting, which of course I get through Gemini or through, a number of other different AI sources. But sometimes it's just an insight that I have during it.
Mhm.
Those notes, and I put them into ChatGPT, and then I'll also put, any decks or background information. And then with the prompts, and this is where I think the real art is in terms of managing and leveraging and executing and fully exploiting AI is you have to be really clear in the prompts and real specific in the prompts.
Yeah, those are great points. Well, as we wrap up, where do you see the future of fractional leadership, going into 2025 and beyond? How do you see it changing given that we have AI and where the market is going?
Yeah, I think AI is actually a tailwind for fractional, right? Because now all of a sudden, if AI can do a lot of the execution work, let's say, and I'm going to use marketing just because that's the area that I'm in, then maybe what you do is you have a fractional CMO come in and sort of oversee this. Maybe this person is the person responsible for those prompts. This person is, will set the overall direction and plan. This person will make sure that the execution is happening because that's something that, you might need to actually deal with either other people or other resources to be able to execute properly. So I actually think it's a tailwind rather than a headwind because what companies tend to do is they tend to swing to extremes, right? Oh, I don't need all these people because of AI, so I'm going to
Yeah,
fire this. Okay. Well,
Klarna.
like, oh,
Yeah, yeah.
great. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute, this stuff's not getting done. So I think it's a tailwind for that, and for the industry.
Great. Well, Lewis, thank you so much for the conversation.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for inviting me and really enjoyed it and good luck to you.
Thanks. Likewise.